Good afternoon. Welcome to the July 12th Suffolk Board of Zoning Appeals meeting. Mr. Skinner, will you please call the roll?
Dominique Epps. Richard Eslick.
Here.
Dan Froman.
Here.
Corey Conagay.
Here.
Melissa Venable.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Are there any corrections to the previous BZA minutes? May I have a motion to accept the May 10th, 2022?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, just say yes.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
The May 2022 minutes have been accepted. Our first agenda item is BZA 18-2022. There are three very similar items in our packet this afternoon: BZA 18-2022, BZA 19, and BZA 20-2022. May I ask the audience if there's anyone here to speak against these three applications or one of these three applications? If not, if it's okay with you, Ms. Cobb, we'd like to hear them simultaneously and just call out the differences as we move through them. BZA 18 is 169 Beck Lane. BZA 19, 2022, see if I can get to it quickly, I apologize, is 131 Beck Lane, and BZA 2022 is 127 Beck Lane. Thank you. Stanley, if you don't mind, would you please read the caption for these?
Before the Board of Zoning Appeals today is BZA 18-2022. The applicant, NRGC Development LLC, is requesting a variance to reduce the required side yard setback to a street from 20 to 10 feet for an existing single-family dwelling. The property is identified as tax map 26F RH 33. The address is 169 Peck Lane, zoning classification, residential, urban density, RU. When you act upon this request, you will be acting on a request to reduce the side adjacent street from 20 to 10 feet for existing single-family dwelling. Should the board decide in favor of approving this request, the 8 findings as listed in your package must be articulated as part of the motion. We also have BZA 1922. The applicant, NRGC Development LLC, is requesting a variance to reduce the required yard setback from adjacent street from 20 to 15 feet for an existing single-family dwelling. The property is identified as tax map 26F RH 15. The address is 131 Peck Lane, zoning classification, residential urban density, RU. When you act upon this request, we'll be acting on a request to reduce the required yard setback adjacent to a street from 20 to 15 feet for an existing single-family dwelling. Should the board decide in favor of approving this request, the 8 findings as listed in your package must be articulated as part of the motion. We also have BZA 2022. The applicant, NRGC Development LLC, is requesting a variance to reduce the required yard setback adjacent to a street from 20 to 10 feet for an existing single-family dwelling. The property is identified as tax map 26F RH 14. The address is 127 Peck Lane, zoning classification, residential urban density, RU. When you act upon this request, you will be acting on a request to reduce the required side yard setback adjacent to a street from 20 to 10 feet for an existing single-family dwelling. Should the board decide in favor of approving this request, the 8 findings as listed in your package must be articulated as part of the motion. We will now have the zoning administrator give staff recommendations by Jennifer Cobb, zoning administrator.
Good afternoon, board members. As previously stated, we're going to combine all these applications, and when I get to the addresses, I will specify the reduced setback request. The applicant, NRGC Development LLC, is requesting a variance from the Unified Development Ordinance, Article 4, Section 31407C, Table 4071, Dimensional Standards L, to reduce the required side yard setback adjacent to a street for an existing single-family dwelling. The property is zoned RU, residential urban density. The variance request was advertised in the Suffolk News Herald, and a notice was mailed to adjacent property owners in accordance with Section 15-2-2204 of the Code of Virginia, and a public sign was posted on the property. The subdivision known as River Highlands was originally platted with open space parcels. These open space parcels were designed with future right-of-ways in mind. The approved subdivision was recorded incorrectly, showing the required side yard setback on these parcels as 5 feet, not the required 20-foot side yard adjacent to a street setback. These homes were permitted and built within the required setback of the future roadway. This hardship was created unintentionally during the plat approval process. These variances are necessary in order to allow the roads to be constructed and the subdivision to be built as originally approved in August 2021. These variance requests are specific to each parcel and will not adversely affect any other properties. Due to the uniqueness of these situations and the unintentional hardship, staff recommends approval of the request. And as mentioned previously, 169 Peck Lane, which is 18-2022 BZA case, is requesting a setback from 20 feet to 10 feet. And then BZA 2022-19, 131 Peck Lane is requesting a variance setback from 20 feet to 15 feet. And then finally, 127 Peck Lane is requesting a variance from 20 feet to 10 feet. And this is the recorded plat shown above, and I can go through if you want to see for each property. And I'm available for any questions the board may have.
Thank you, Ms. Cobb. Do we have any questions before she sits down? Okay, thank you. And I also want to mention that I will be recusing myself from voting on this item as my firm has had involvement with NRGC Development LLC. We will now open the public hearing. We have 30 minutes in length, 10 minutes for proponents, 15 minutes for opposition, and 5 minutes for rebuttal. Is there anyone here to speak in favor of this application or these 3 applications? Let me be clear.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairperson, members of the board. My name is Tuck Bowie. I'm with NRGC Development LLC. We are the developers of the River Highlands community and also the builders of all 3 houses out there. First of all, I'd like to thank Ms. Cobb. I've been in this business for 28 years, first time I've ever been in front of the Board of Zoning Appeals. This was a result of an unintentional situation. The plat was drawn incorrectly, was approved and recorded incorrectly. The site plans were drawn, fortunately, as opposed to putting the side of the house directly on the side of the property line that we're asking the variance for. The house was actually situated in the center of the lot itself, which made our requested date less than what it could have potentially been. Before this application was submitted, I met with, of the 3 applications in front of you today, 2 of the houses are sold and closed on. The other one, the house was under construction, and we don't have a buyer for that. I met with the 2 owners of the houses that are impacted by this, sat down and explained the situation to them. They understood. They wanted to make sure that this was done correctly. They signed the application that you have in front of you. So it's not me standing here in front of you asking for something that those owners were not aware of. Fortunately, there is a 4th house that has not been built yet, and when we were made aware of this problem, that site plan was corrected and that house will be built in accordance with the required 20-foot side yard setback. So, as was mentioned by Ms. Cobb earlier, this request is specific to these 3 lots. It won't impact any other lots in the community. It's necessary for these roads to be extended to serve the next phase of development that will occur out there that our company will also be developing. And I certainly request and hope that you folks understand the situation and will grant this variance. And I'll stand aside to answer any questions you may have. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Bowie. Is there anyone else to speak in favor of this application? Seeing none, is there anyone to speak against or in opposition of the applications? And this would be for BZA 2022-18, BZA 2022-19, and BZA 2022-20. Seeing no one to speak in opposition, Mr. Bowie, would you like to add anything additional? With no additional speakers, we will close the public hearing. Sorry, I had to. Is there any discussion in regard to the three applications?
I just want to comment that these are situations that appear before us on a regular basis, and we see no objection that I know of. I move we accept all three.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there discussion? Mr. Skinner, will you please take a vote?
Dominique Epps, Richard Eslick,
Yes.
Dan Froman,
Yes.
Corey Conagay.
Yes.
The motion passed.
Terrific. Thank you, Mr. Bowie. We will move on to BZA 21-2022. Mr. Skinner, would you please read the caption for this item?
Before the Board of Zoning Appeals today is BZA 21-2022. The applicant, Casa Investments, is requesting a variance to reduce the required yard setback adjacent to a street from 25 feet to 5 feet for the construction of a 6-foot privacy fence. The property is identified as tax map 13A, John PTS 3537. The address is 4978 Town Point Road. Zoning classification residential medium density RM. When you act upon this request, you will be acting on a request to reduce the required yard setback adjacent to a street from 25 feet to 5 feet for the construction of a 6-foot privacy fence. Should the board decide in favor of approving this request, the 8 findings as listed in your package must be articulated as part of the motion. We will now have staff analysis and recommendations by Jennifer Cobb, Zoning Administrator.
As previously stated, the applicant, Casa Investments LLC, is requesting a variance from the Unified Development Ordinance, Article 4, Section 31407C, Table 4071, Dimensional Standards L, to reduce the required side yard setback adjacent to a street from 25 feet to 5 feet for construction of a 6-foot privacy fence. The property is identified as tax map 13A, asterisk John, asterisk PTS, asterisk 35, asterisk 37, and located at 4978 Town Point Road, Suffolk, Virginia, Nansman Voting Borough. Zoning classification RM, residential medium density. This variance request was advertised in the Suffolk News Herald, and a notice was mailed to adjacent property owners in accordance with Section 15-2204 of the Code of Virginia, and a sign was posted on the property. The applicant is requesting a variance to reduce the required side yard adjacent to a street in order to construct a new 6-foot privacy fence. Section 3170110A of the UDO states, "A fence or wall not more than 6 feet in height may be located in any required side yard or rear yard other than a required yard adjacent to a street. No fence or wall which creates a solid screen may exceed 2.5 feet in height in any required yard adjacent to a street, except that fences having a uniform open area of 50% or more may be erected to a maximum of 4 feet in such required yards. This lot is non-conforming as it does not meet the dimensional standards required for newly platted lots in the RM zoning district. The applicant consulted with the Civic League as well as the Homeowners Association to ensure they were making the fence as aesthetically pleasing as possible. The applicant is proposing a 5-foot setback off of John Street to avoid creating a solid wall on the property line and starting the fence halfway down the home to ensure it does not create any corner visibility concerns. Without the variance, the 6-foot fence would have to come right off the back of the home and would not allow for any side yard for the homeowners to enjoy. The applicant stated the fence was for privacy, and a 4-foot opaque fence would not provide the same security privacy as the 6-foot fence. The lot also has an irregular shape on the left-hand corner from a previous encroachment, which also decreases the amount of usable yard. Due to the issues this lot faces, staff recommends approval of this request, and I'm available for any questions the board may have.
Thank you, Ms. Cobb. Is there any questions for Ms. Cobb before she has the seat? while she's at the podium? Thank you so much. Once again, we will open the public hearing. Hearings are 30 minutes in length, 10 minutes for proponents, 15 minutes for opposition, and 5 minutes for rebuttal. Is there anyone here to speak in favor of this application?
Hello, my name's Scott Doverspike. I'm the builder with Casa Investments. And like Mrs. Cobb had said, thank you. It's a very peculiar lot with the encroachment on the backyard. There was a structure built there, probably in the 50s, and they had a couple homes there. The family owned the same lots, so they just kind of put the houses where they felt they wanted to. But as times went on, the lots were subdivided, and the property lines, because of the medium density requirement, the lots are required to be 60 by 120, which it is, except for the encroachment. But the house is set back per code 25 feet from the side street and 25 feet from the front street, even though you like you said, you have two fronts. But with the rear yard not being that big, I'm trying to get a family in there, and just to come halfway down the home with a fence coming out, I would come out, I wanted to stay 5 feet off the boundary line because there's a ditch there for drainage, and for the city to do any type of maintenance or anything there. I didn't want to be right on the property line, so I moved it in. And also, like Mrs. Cobb had mentioned about, the 50% down the sideline is to create so there isn't a block. So if you're pulling up to Town Point Road, you're not going to see nothing but fence because you need to be able to look down each way to yield for traffic. But this will create at least a secure area for the family in the back, and they won't have to worry about anything.
Thank you, sir. We'll call you back if we have any additional questions.
All right, thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much. Is there anyone here to speak in opposition of this application? Is there anything additional or anyone that you'd like to add, sir?
No, ma'am.
Thank you. With that, we will close the public hearing. Do we have any questions or comments?
I'd like to comment, a couple of months ago, we had a very similar request, and we approved that. And to stay in line with that decision, I'll make a motion that this be approved.
We have a motion from Mr. Eslick and a second from Mr. Froman for the application. Is there a discussion on the motion? I'd like to say I really appreciate you that you've taken the time for the setback, and also having the fence come down midway along the side of the house. I don't typically like to support these corner fences, which is in opposition to what the ordinance requests, but I think in this case, you've taken a lot of time and effort to make sure that it's placed well, and it's being conceived very well. So I thank you for that. If there's nothing additional, we'll go ahead and call for a vote, Mr. Skinner.
Dominique Epps, Richard Eslick,
Yes.
Dan Froman,
Yes.
Corey Conagay,
Yes.
Melissa Venable.
Yes.
The motion passes.
Wonderful, thank you. I believe that is the end of our public hearing items. We do have two new business items that we need to vote on this afternoon. The first thing is we are voting on officers for the Suffolk Board of Zoning Appeals, Chair, Vice Chair, and Secretary. So I think we will begin with let's begin with the Secretary, and we would nominate Mr. Stanley Skinner, or I would nominate Mr. Stanley Skinner to continue to hold that position. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Have a second for Mr. Froman. Let's take a vote. Do you call roll, or?
You can just say all in favor.
All in favor of Mr. Skinner continuing to be our secretary, say aye.
Aye.
I think that's unanimous, sir.
Thank you.
The second item would be nominating our vice chair. Do we have a nomination for our vice chair position?
I'll nominate Mr. Eslick.
I second.
Have a first and a second for Mr. Dick Eslick to be our vice chair. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. And lastly, we would like a nomination for the chair position.
I'd like to nominate Melissa Venable.
Second.
We have a nominee, we have, really nervous about this. There's a nomination and a second.
Overwhelming.
Yeah, let's call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Nays? There are no nays.
No nays.
No nays. So we have Mr. Skinner as our secretary, Mr. Eslick as our vice chair, and Ms. Venable as the chair position. That's wonderful news. The second item of business is we have to make a change for the November 15th meeting. This will normally have been the second Tuesday, or the first Tuesday of the month, second Tuesday of the month, but because of election, this will be moved to November 15th. To keep it at 2 o'clock, we would have some conflict with the Planning Commission meeting, so we would like to move the meeting from 2 p.m. to 9 a.m. on November 15th, 2022. All in favor of that time change from 2 p.m. to 9 a.m. on November 15th, please say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Okay, we will have a November 15th, 9 a.m. BZA hearing. I believe that is all we have for today. That concludes our meeting. That's it, the end. We'll close our hearing.